What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the top 20 of my 2020 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Cleveland Browns. A quick reminder, please do hit that like button. It really helps share my video and support my channel. So thank you in advance for that. So this Browns team is almost like a ghost living in the shadow of last year's hype train. This was last year's sort of off-season champion. Everyone was kind of waiting to see the hype come together with Baker coming off of his fantastic rookie season, a lot of the big moves they made. This team was ready to go, and people thought, all right, playoffs. There was people picking this team to go to the Super Bowl last year, but it almost backfired in a hilarious fashion, because the one thing I said in last year's deep dive was like, I like this team, but there's this kind of thing lurking, like how are they going to find a way to Cleveland Brown their way into screwing this thing up? And sure enough, they had just this train wreck season in the most Cleveland Browns fashion, and now we're sitting here a year later. There's still some of that residue, some of that talent. This roster is actually pretty special, but yet again, we're sitting here like, why should this year be any different? So we'll talk about why it might be different this year, what new pieces are here, what could go differently. If you're new to the series, what we do is we go through the roster position by position, talk about how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So while I realize that is a video game, they are my own ratings, and it's a nice copyright-free graphic that I get to use to show you how I perceive each player. So just keep that in mind. Then we are going to go through this team's schedule, talk about their Vegas over-under, and my win total expectations. And we're going to hop right in to the roster review here, starting with the quarterback here, Baker Mayfield in this room, going to rank 17th. And Baker as a rookie was, the hype was warranted. He was one of the most efficient rookies we've seen come into the league, and he was thriving, showing off his strengths, the anticipation, throwing over the middle of the field, the arm talent, the accuracy, the ability to sense pressure, and know how to manipulate the pocket and knowing when to extend plays. It was all there, and he looked special, really, really special. And that hype carried into last year, but as the offensive line went from one of the best to worst from year one to year two, I think defenses also really caught on to sort of his aggressive processor, really targeting tight windows into the second level of zone coverages. I think defenses really caught on and forced Baker to change up his game a little bit, and we saw a significantly worse version of Baker Mayfield in year two. So if this team could even get halfway back of what they had in year one Baker Mayfield, and you hope that getting a tackle duo in here like they've done that we'll talk about will help that, you're going to get, in my opinion, at least top 20 quarterback play. I don't know if you can say sophomore season Baker Mayfield was even a top 20 quarterback, but you can't just ignore what he did as a rookie either. So Baker's a little different than a guy like Drew Lock in that we have seen him play over the course of the majority of a season at a pretty high level. Like, Baker at his best is a really special top 10 or so quarterback with every skill you look for a quote-unquote elite quarterback. So you obviously hope, if you're a Browns fan, Baker can reach that upside. He was the number one overall pick. His arm talent, I missed on it, man. He can fire that thing, and there is few things more beautiful in the NFL right now than Baker Mayfield firing an accurate strike up the seam, thrown to a skinny post behind a cover 3 hook zone. Like, he does some really special things. He's accurate with his deep ball. You just hope everything can come together and you can unlock that. But I will say, unlike some of these other quarterbacks we've talked about in recent deep dives, I do think Baker gives this team a nice floor at quarterback as well. And even if he doesn't weed out some of those mistakes he showed in year two, most quarterbacks in the league do have mistakes. So I think you're still going to get a really nice high floor top 20 quarterback or so. And the upside's in there as well. Behind him, you've got Keyz. He's the ideal backup to Baker Mayfield. He's also familiar with this scheme, having worked with Kevin Stefanski, who we'll talk about in a little bit, with the Minnesota Vikings. But he's the ideal backup. He's got similar mobility. He's got the same sort of confident processor. If, God forbid, anything happened to Baker and you needed Keyz for a half here or a game there, he would at least allow this offense to execute and put the ball in the hands of all these playmakers here. Then you got Garrett Gilbert, Kevin Davidson. I'm pretty sure they're just going to go with 2 quarterbacks here. So 17th with the quarterback room. Now we get to talk about the running back room here, and this is a rare sort of scenario here with a offensive coordinator that was one of the most efficient run games in the league last year with Minnesota, with a running back duo that is going to rank 5th in the league right now, and an offensive line that has the opportunity to be really special. This could be one of those run games, one of those rare run games that actually changes the course of a team's season. Even the tight ends they brought in Austin Hooper, who's a good blocker. So we actually get to really highlight this running back room and say this could actually make a difference in this team's season. We have not done that a lot to the point in this series because the run game just isn't that important. But if you can have, just like we saw with teams like the Ravens and the Niners last year, if you can have an elite run game, if you're averaging 4 to 5 yards a carry and not going backwards very often, like that's a real thing. It's just rare, right? Most run games don't look like that, but if Cleveland can have that here, you could really get talking. So you have Nick Chubb, who, if you want to just talk about ability as a runner between the tackles, you have to consider him in the top 5. He is really special as a running back. He has a nice combination of like Le'Veon Bell's vision, Arian Foster, Matt Forte, their ability to almost glide through holes and accelerate into holes, almost like dancing around traffic, like just really fluid, rare movement ability. And then you even throw in the power of a guy like Marshawn Lynch. I mean, Nick Chubb is a very, very special runner. He has fully recovered from that knee injury at Georgia and looks every bit the part of that elite 5-star prospect, exceptional athlete with the skill to be one of the best running backs in the league. Now, he doesn't help himself with his ability as a receiver. He's good enough to catch screens and simple pass concepts, not necessarily a threat out of the backfield, but I think he's scary enough with the ball in his hands, and he will catch the ball, even if he doesn't have everything you look for in a receiving back, that he'll keep you honest. And then you have Kareem Hunt here, who totally took himself out of the conversation through his off-field drama, but he's still a really good running back. We only saw him for the last kind of third of last season, but he still showed that rare ability to consistently make the first guy miss. His contact balance is a buzzword and a trait for running backs as far as absorbing contact, understanding angles, not going down on contact. It's not exactly power, but contact balance. I still think Kareem Hunt is in the conversation for the best contact balance, ability to make the first man miss consistently in the NFL, and that really helps him in the receiving game. So he does have a power element to his game as well, and keep in mind he was considered top 5 running back not even a year ago, so or maybe just over a year ago. So this isn't like your traditional thunder and lightning approach, right? It's not like you have a power back and a receiving back. Both these guys can do a little bit of everything. It's more like a earthquake and thunder, with Nick Chubb being the earthquake and Kareem Hunt being the thunder. It's a really special duo. I don't think there's a better running back duo in the NFL right now. Even if you wouldn't consider either of them necessarily top 5 running backs, both of them are pretty close, and you got 2 of them. So really special running back room. The depth here is nothing really of note. The veterans here I don't really care about. I would say keep an eye on both Benny LeMay and Brian Herrien. Brian Herrien, he's reuniting with Nick Chubb here. He was at Georgia for 4 years, but he was just kind of pictured like the James White of the Georgia offense. He's a good receiver out of the backfield. He's a smart player. He's a hard worker. Just he was behind Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift, even more 5 stars that are still there at Georgia right now. Like, he was constantly behind these elite athletes. But I think Brian Herrien can be a good third running back here, and if you had an injury, he would be a good backup. So I like that addition. That's the most we've spent on a running back room in a long time. By the way, let's even mention a fullback here. They traded for Andy Janovich. This team is going to try to run the ball at a very high level, and I think they have a very good chance to do that. And it's actually a scenario where the running backs here are going to matter. So we don't say that a lot, but I think that was worth talking about. Now let's talk about the receivers. So we all know that Odell and Jarvis Landry are here. Odell was surprisingly bad last year. Now, he seemed to be dealing with nagging injuries. It was kind of hard to watch. He just did not look like Odell Beckham. He, in his prime with the Giants, was just untouchable with the ball in his hands and as a route runner. It just wasn't the same. He wasn't creating the same separation, and specifically, he didn't have that same ability to catch a slant and just take it to the house. And you hope that can come back. If it can, he can get back in the conversation as a top 5 receiver in this league. But is it going to happen? I think with Odell here, he is at least a good number 1 option. The regression we saw last year, I think, is real, though, and he has had some injuries over the course of his career. So there's some upside there. I would love to see prime Odell Beckham back. It's not like he's old. He's just kind of going through some stuff. So what are we going to get from Odell Beckham? That much is a little bit unclear. And then Jarvis Landry is your number 2 option here. Is he still the best slot receiver in the NFL? He's certainly up there. He might be the best true slot receiver in the NFL. I thought that him with Baker Mayfield's skill set, really targeting the ball over the middle of the field, was going to be a lethal combination. 2 of the best in the league at that specific trait. You want to talk about short to intermediate passing game and being efficient in executing it. Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, in theory, should be a beautiful combination. It just didn't show last year through the play calling and the coaches that were there. So can Kevin Stefanski unlock that a little bit? Maybe use Jarvis Landry in a lot of ways, like Adam Thielen was used often in the slot for the Minnesota Vikings. Keep an eye on that. There's a lot of potential with that duo, but it wasn't there last year, and you can't just assume that these guys will get back to what we saw well over a year ago as far as just Odell and Jarvis. By the way, the receiving ranking is going to be 11th here. The receiver depth behind those guys is really not that special at all. So you have Rashard Higgins, who has a nice chemistry with Baker Mayfield. He is the 3rd receiver here who will play both from the slot and outside. He's kind of the physical, tough, find a hole in zone kind of receiver, but not an elite athlete, not a mismatch problem at all. You have Taywan Taylor, was a good pickup from Tennessee. Tennessee kind of just let him go by the wayside, but when he's been on the field, he's been a pretty functional slot receiver. So another guy that could get in the mix here, but we'll see there. And then you do draft Donovan Peoples-Jones in the 6th round. Now, I really liked this pick. I think this offense is missing, frankly, what they had in Brashad Perriman in Baker's rookie season, with that speed over the top and that threat of a deep threat. Even if it was just as a decoy, I don't know if Peoples-Jones is quite fast enough to do that, but he is a vertical receiver. He's a big-bodied guy with some speed. You're talking about one of the top recruits in his class, a 5-star receiver that just never reached his potential in a pretty anemic passing game at Michigan, led by Shea Patterson, if you can even use the word led. So he's just a very raw prospect, a 6th-round pick for a reason, but there is some upside in there, and most people saw him as more of a 3rd or 4th-round guy. It's a very deep wide receiver class. He may have just been pushed down. So can he really impress in a new environment here? Kevin Stefanski worked with a somewhat similar player in Laquan Treadwell, actually got some decent things out of him from time to time. So we'll see what Donovan Peoples-Jones can do. He's a bit of a wild card there. But the wide receiver room, it's good. I don't know if it's great because I just don't know what Odell is going to bring to the table. I would like to think he can get back to being that top 10 wide receiver, but it is a little tough to sit here and just expect that to happen at this point. And then the depth after Jarvis is a concern. But I will say, this offense is going to run a ton of 2 tight end looks, and there are not many tight end duos better than David Njoku and Austin Hooper. And they even draft Harrison Bryant as a 3rd piece in the 4th round, who is perfect in that role. And literally just as I sat down to record this, news broke that Njoku is requesting a trade. So if Njoku were to get traded, I actually like Harrison Bryant as the number 2 tight end here. I think he could step into that role and play. Maybe not quite up to Njoku's level, but at least at a serviceable level that would allow this offense to run the scheme that they want to run. as a guy that can make an impact in the receiving game. So you got Njoku, who's kind of that elite mismatch problem with the size, speed, run after catch ability. Needs to put it all together, though. Like, he has drop issues, doesn't do much as a route runner. The upside's there, but can they unlock it in a scheme that is very tight end friendly? We'll see. Austin Hooper, much more of a high floor, low ceiling kind of guy. He is not a great athlete. He does not win against man-to-man coverage, but very smart finding holes in zone coverages. I think you're going to want to try to run a lot of man coverage against this team, because between Jarvis, Rashard Higgins, and Austin Hooper, and Baker Mayfield's ability to dissect zone defenses, I think that's going to be a strength of this team, is attacking zone. But beating man coverage, if Odell can't step up, you might be able to get to this team. So just something of note. But yeah, it's a good tight end room. It's one of the better tight end rooms in the league, and a scheme that's going to put a lot of emphasis on that. And then you have Nate Whiting and Pharaoh Brown, I bet, and Steven Carlson. I bet one of those guys will make the team. And again, we mentioned Andy Janovich. So this is going to look a lot more like those 49ers, Packers, Titans, Vikings offenses, where you're getting a lot of outside zone, a lot of heavier packages, play action. It's going to be a much different looking Browns team, and they have a lot of talent to make it happen. And this offensive line that we haven't mentioned yet is going to contribute to that as well. So they're going to rank 11th for the offensive line as well. You got some new pieces in here. I will say that this absolutely has the potential to be the best offensive line in the NFL. So last year, I pointed out in the deep dive that they were remarkably healthy in 2018, and the tackle duo, I was not expecting to repeat its performance from 2018, and my God, did that prove true. Like, this turned into one of the worst tackle duos in the league last year with Chris Hubbard and Greg Robinson. So they have completely revamped that unit, spending a lot of capital in it. Jack Conklin, one of the biggest free agent signings at right tackle, who's a very good run blocker, will be perfect for this outside zone scheme that he played in Tennessee. He is up and down as a pass blocker, but I am still all for that signing. It's going to be a massive upgrade to what you had at right tackle. And then they draft Jedrick Wills in the first round, which was an excellent pick. Jedrick Wills was one of the best tackle prospects to come out in a long time. It was a very good tackle class. Cleveland was lucky to be able to get him at number 10, in my opinion. I feel very good about him at left tackle, even though he's going to have to relearn that technique. You're going to have some questions about any rookie tackle, and I think Wills at times did show some heavier feet, might struggle with some speed at the next level. But that said, he's going to be going up against Myles Garrett every day at practice, and that's only going to make him better. So I like the tackle duo a lot. I think that's the best thing that this team did, was bringing those guys in. An excellent job of identifying your weaknesses and doing everything you can to make sure that it doesn't hurt you the next year, because I really think that was the root of what kind of broke Baker Mayfield last year, was that pressure off the edge. Now, the interior offensive line is phenomenal. I will still, to this day, disagree with trading Kevin Zeitler for Olivier Vernon, because if you had Zeitler on this line, oh my God. But that's neither here nor there. You have a good center in J.C. Shredder, probably top 15 or so, very sound as a pass blocker. You have Joel Bitonio, is one of the best guards in the NFL. And then the right guard spot is really the only reason this isn't a top 10 offensive line, if I'm going to be honest. You have Wyatt Teller, who was a really good addition to pick up in a trade with Buffalo. So I like that. You also are going to have Chris Hubbard probably competing for a guard spot, and then Nick Harris, a 5th-round pick out of Washington. Now, Harris to me was more of a project at center, but I mean that in the best way possible. His movement skills are phenomenal, and I said when they drafted him, I can't picture a much better scheme other than the other zone teams that we've talked about already than Nick Harris playing for, because his ability to get off and find guys in space is special. So he could work as an undersized, really athletic guard in this scheme. So you're going to have some competition. I just don't think you're going to get anything much more than replacement level starting play at right guard, but they are at the same time going to be helped by both competition and the people around them. So 11th for offensive line. This Browns team hasn't exactly earned the benefit of the doubt, done a lot of this stuff. That is probably worst case scenario. I like a lot of the things that they did to make sure that Baker is going to have a good moving company in front of him. Let's just say that. So the offense as a whole is going to rank 18th. A lot of that just has to do with moving pieces. You have the way Baker Mayfield looked last year. You have a new coordinator in Kevin Stefanski. I think we did a good job to sort of highlight what the offense is going to look like under him, who is the new head coach here coming over from Minnesota. But the offensive coach and culture is going to rank 26th just because of the unknowns and the lack of the benefit of the doubt that the Cleveland Browns have earned here. So then the defensive side of the ball, the defensive coach and culture is going to rank 30th with Joe Woods, who I'm frankly not that familiar with. They're on to their third defensive coordinator in as many years. I think this team would have been smart to try to keep Greg Williams around, because this defense, that was another big reason this team had hype heading into last season, was how good this defense played under Greg Williams, and they have not been able to reestablish that physicality and cohesiveness as a defense since. So can Joe Woods change that? I'm not going to act like I'm some expert on Joe Woods. We're just going to have to wait and see what he can do as a defense coordinator here. But let's go through the roster itself. So starting with the run defense, this is a problem for me. Your starting interior guys are going to be Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi, which to me is an issue. Richardson, he's kind of known for being up and down as a character off the field. And when I watch the Browns, that shows as far as his effort as a run defender. It's almost like a week-to-week thing with him if he wants to try against the run. Now, he's going to be a presence as a pass rusher, and we'll talk about that. But he is a concern to me in run defense. And can this culture get that effort out of him? I just don't feel confident saying yes. Larry Ogunjobi is an interesting player. I like to think of that as kind of stand-up, gap control, hand-fighting interior guy. He just doesn't have a ton of burst. He's a fine player. He was much better in his first two seasons as he's been. I'm just not a very big Larry Ogunjobi guy. I think he's regressed since he got into the league, honestly. But he's a decent third. Now, you do bring in Andrew Billings, who it was so good against the run last year. I would expect that he is going to have to force his way to the top of this depth chart on early downs. He's just a better run defender than Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi, but is Cleveland going to realize that on the interior? Or is he just going to play a rotational role and only play 20% of snaps? So I do think Andrew Billings is the best run defender on the interior on this team, but how much is he going to play? And then you do draft Jordan Elliott in the third round. Some people really liked him. He is one of those guys to me where his highlights look really impressive. He does have a good get-off and kind of good movement skills and technique as a pass rusher. It's just on a play-to-play basis, almost like Sheldon Richardson, where it's like, does he have the discipline? Does he have the consistency? Or is he just a flash player? I think he's more of a flash player. And then you don't have a lot of depth behind there with Eli Anko, Daniel Equale, Justin Zimmerman. So you have some bodies here. The interior is not the worst in the league, but I'm just not very excited about this interior, especially when you talk about run defense. Now, the edge group is going to be pretty special here, and it's going to be tough to hit them with outside zones when you've got Olivier Vernon and Myles Garrett controlling those gaps. Those guys are total beasts. You even have an Adrian Claiborne who is a bigger-bodied edge as well. So I do like what you have there, but another pretty big issue for this team in run defense is the linebacker room, which, we'll talk about them in a minute, but they're not going to rank very well. You have a rookie in Jacob Phillips, who's a good athlete, but was never much of a presence for LSU. Sion Takitaki, I don't even think he's better than BJ Goodson, who isn't very good, but he's probably going to start as a third-round pick from last year. And then Mac Wilson's a good coverage player, but does not offer much as a run defender. So the linebacker room actually is going to hurt this run defense quite a bit, which is going to rank 29th in the league. And I always say as well that run defense is much more about coach and coaching culture, discipline, technique, scheme. That's all missing here with Cleveland. So even if you have some bodies on the interior, on the front, It's just tough to project this team becoming the tough, physical-minded, cohesive unit that you need to be a top run defense. So I am a little worried about their run defense this year. It just kind of is what it is. At least their run game is going to be relevant on the offensive side of the ball, but I think this might be a rare situation where run defense hurts this team. We don't spend a lot of time talking about run game, but I think with this Cleveland Browns team, it's gonna be an interesting season. Let's just leave it at that. But the pass rush is gonna rank 8th. You have Myles Garrett, who I wouldn't be surprised if he wins. Either comeback player of the year if he's eligible for that, or defensive player of the year. He really is, I think, ready for that, and he was dominating last year before the just moronic act that he did. Almost smashing in Mason Rudolph's head with a helmet, which I am not going to defend. I've been very transparent. I'm not going to be cheering for Myles Garrett. I say a lot of times in these deep dives, I cheer for these guys to be successful. I have no emotional reason to want Myles Garrett to succeed, but there's also no denying how unbelievably gifted he is as a football player. So we're past it. He's back in the league. I hope he does everything he can to make amends for it and comes out and kicks ass and takes names this year for the Browns. But Olivier Vernon is going to be the opposite side. He's a good number 2 pass rusher. I think they overpaid for him, giving up one of the best guards in the league, but that's neither here nor there, like I said earlier. It's a really good edge duo. It's one of the best in the league simply because Myles Garrett is as good as he is, but Olivier Vernon, you still have to account for him. If you have a worse offensive tackle and you leave him one-on-one, he is going to bulldoze that offensive tackle. So he still has a good skill set as a power rusher. And then on the interior, Sheldon Richardson is a very capable interior rusher. He's somewhere between a low-end number 1 and a high-end number 2. He's just a good pass rusher. And then you're hoping for probably a guy like Jordan Elliott to step up as a third-round rookie who did rush the passer at a pretty high level at Missouri. Or Adrian Claiborne to play some interior pass rush in certain packages. You do have some options there. It could be worse. So they do rank 8th. I think this pass rush is going to be this defense's best path to being a very good unit. And then you have the linebacker room. Like I said, it is a concern. They're ranked 28th. We went through the names. It's Jacob Phillips, who I don't expect much from, especially as a rookie. He has some developmental upside as an athlete, but not a guy that I think should be starting in year 1 by any stretch of the imagination, especially in a position with a tough learning curve, such as linebacker. Then you're going to have kind of a competition at middle to take Joe Schobert's place, who is departing here. Sion Taki and BJ Goodson. I don't particularly like either of those players. Neither are phenomenal athletes or have particularly good coverage skills. Those two probably are your 2 best run defending linebackers. And then you have Mac Wilson. He's probably the name that you're most optimistic about. He's kind of like a Nigel Bradham in a way. He's really nifty in coverage. He baits quarterbacks. He's got good burst. He is a guy that you got to kind of be aware of him lurking in that second level because he'll jump routes like a free safety. He's got some really nice plays, but it's tough to get those on a play-to-play basis. And what does he do between the margins? Not a ton. He just isn't overly physical, doesn't take on blocks all that well. He's not the best tackler in the world, but definitely somebody you want to keep an eye on in the coverage unit. And then the depth behind them is really bad. It's hardly worth talking about guys like Trayvon Young, Willie Harvey, Jermaine Grace, Solomon Ajayi. Tay Davis is just not a good linebacker room at all. Then you have the secondary here. You've got Denzel Ward is a legit high-end number 1 starter who in year 3 here could take that jump up to being in the conversation for one of the best corners in the league. He was, as a rookie, up there in that conversation. Just wasn't as good last year as the defense wasn't really on the same page together. So you hope that can help. It will always help your corners when the rest of the defense is clicking. But no questions at all about what you're getting from Denzel Ward. Then you do have some questions, really throughout the rest of this secondary. The secondary is going to rank 17th, by the way. But Greedy Williams is your second corner. I love me some Greedy coming out. He fell because he didn't tackle in college. Really not a concern for me. He's a phenomenal athlete. I expect pretty good things from Greedy Williams in year 2. He was a really good corner prospect. I had him as a top 15 player in that class. I thought it was one of the steals of the class. So expecting big things from Greedy, but there are some question marks there. He looked like a rookie corner in his first season. I'll just leave it at that. Then the slot corner is probably going to be Terrence Mitchell. It's a good, capable slot corner. He'll get the job done. I don't think he's some elite slot corner or anything, but starting caliber nonetheless. Kevin Johnson was a good pickup. I think he's a great addition here because he's got a lot of experience. He's a good athlete. He's a guy that has played some nickel. He's played some outside. A really experienced player that I think is going to challenge Greedy, challenge Terrence Mitchell, and can play anywhere in the event of injury. So I do like that as depth. And then there's really nobody. Donnie Lewis, Robert Jackson, Donovan Alumba, Taveri Thomas. They do pick up AJ Green out of Oklahoma State, who's not a good athlete. They're 4 deep of kind of starting caliber corners, and then the safety group is fine. You have Andrew Sendejo, Carl Joseph, and Grant Delpit. So how are these guys going to get used? You would think it's going to be Carl Joseph and Grant Delpit as the 2 starters. Grant Delpit was a second-round pick out of LSU. I really liked Delpit. I did have a first-round grade on him. Now, to me, I like Grant Delpit the most as actually a box safety. Now, it's counterintuitive because his biggest weakness in college was tackling and kind of getting his ankles broken. Literally, he had an ankle injury that I think did hurt his ability to make tackles in his final season. But to me, his best plays are within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, whether it's as a buzz zone defender, manning up tight ends, playing curl flats, like that traditional strong safety. To me, that's where he was best at LSU in the tape that I watched. He's got some good burst in the length to play free safety. I just really like his skill set to become a high-level strong safety, like top 5 strong safety, almost in the Derwin James, Jamal Adams mold of an athlete. You just got to teach him better tackling technique. That's like the easiest thing to coach in the NFL. So if they're playing him at free safety with Carl Joseph as the strong safety, I'm just not quite as enthusiastic about it. It's kind of similar to what this team did with Jabril Peppers, who was a similar investment as a late first-round pick, who they tried playing at free safety, and that's just not what he exceeds at. So I'm a little afraid that they're going to make that same mistake, having brought in Carl Joseph here. Now, I get it. If you play Grant at strong, you're then putting Carl Joseph at free safety, where he's a worse free safety, I think, than Grant Delpit. So maybe it's going to be best to actually play Andrew Sendejo at free safety and keep Carl Joseph as a rotational third. I don't know. I think I've explained that pretty well. I think you have 2 strong safeties here in Grant Delpit and Carl Joseph. Now, again, I understand that Grant Delpit played a lot of free safety at LSU, and he wasn't bad at it. I just think if you really want him to reach his potential, I would model his game after similar athletes like Jamal Adams coming out of LSU and Derwin James. Have him play that role for you in this defense. But behind Sendejo, you do have Sheldrick Redwine, who could be a free safety here. I would almost be intrigued to start Sheldrick Redwine and Grant Delpit at strong safety, Redwine at free, and just see how those 2 work together, because to me, that's the skill set that makes sense. You've got the rangy free safety type in Redwine and get Grant Delpit to really mold into that strong safety position. So it's an interesting conversation to have. I'm interested to see how they use Grant Delpit. You're going to have kind of starting caliber play regardless in that safety room, but I'm not overly confident in any of it to be exceptional. So other than Denzel Ward, it's just not overly exciting. Now, with Greedy and Grant Delpit, the LSU secondary reunited, there is some upside there. Am I projecting them to reach it? Clearly not really. You could do worse, but I don't think they're going to be locked down with a pretty young unit, still kind of trying to figure it out with their 3rd coordinator in as many years. So 17th for the defensive back. You can tell this defense, I'm not very optimistic about it. I'm going to rank it 27th. You have big names here, right? You have Myles Garrett, you have Denzel Ward, And you have a flashy player in Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams, who at this point are still probably bigger names than they're actually going to make impacts. But the holes scattered throughout this defense are problematic. You mix in a defensive coordinator that we don't know much about, a coaching culture that has done nothing but prove otherwise here. I think the idea of this defense is much better than it's actually going to look like on Sundays in a couple months. So 27th for the overall defensive ranking here, which is pretty harsh, but I really am not all that excited about the defense. It's going to be about, can this offense really come on? And if this run game can become one of the 2 or 3 best run games in the league, you might be able to take some of that pressure off this defense and let them come together more cohesively throughout the season without putting too much pressure on them. That's going to be their best path to success. Let's take a look at this team schedule, talk about my win total expectations for this team. So their Vegas over-under is 8.5 wins. So the Vegas is setting the bar pretty high for this team. That's up there as far as win total, and I would say that's relatively justified given the roster talent here. But they do have to open at Baltimore. But then they get Cincinnati and Washington at home. I have them starting 2-1, but then losing 4 straight at Dallas, Indianapolis, at Pittsburgh, at Cincinnati. I think Indianapolis and Cincinnati are winnable games. Those are going to be big parts of this team's season. It gets a little better down the stretch. They've got the Raiders and Texans and Eagles all at home. It's 3-game homestand. So I've got them going 2-1 in that stretch. At Jacksonville, I gave them a win. At Tennessee, I gave them a loss. Baltimore at home, I think it's going to be a tough game. But then they do wrap up with a New York doubleheader at the Giants, at the Jets. That's going to be a big week for them as far as a playoff push. And then finishing with Pittsburgh at home with a win. So 7-9 is my win prediction for this team at this point in time. The win range is 6-11. This is a team that has a lot of moving pieces, a new coach, a lot of young players. You're going to get some more polarizing elements when you're talking about a team like that. I think this is a team that absolutely has playoff potential. They're in this tier of teams for that reason. As far as the 8.5 win over-under, I'm going to say no bet. I could easily see them going over that, but I can easily see them being the Cleveland Browns and just not figuring everything out like you need to do in the NFL. If you want to be a playoff team in the NFL, you need to be a united team with a consistent kind of character about you. And I don't know if the Browns are an organization that's going to be able to find that this year. It might just be another year away. I don't know. This is kind of their window as far as their roster with Baker still in that rookie contract. So you hope they can figure it out. And if they can, maybe get in the playoffs, and then who knows? I would even say this team has some hidden Super Bowl potential if everything clicks, but that's getting a little ahead of myself. I hope you guys enjoyed the deep dive. Have a great 4th of July, soaking up this one. We had a little doubleheader here with this and the Broncos yesterday, so soak all that up, soak up the sun, live it up. Please do hit that like button down below. Drop a comment who you think is next. Do you think this is too high or too low for the Browns? Until next time, cheers, and we'll see you next time.